The fields of eastern France were quiet after days of constant movement. American infantry from the 3rd Armored Division moved cautiously along a narrow country road, checking the ruins of farmhouses and burned-out vehicles left behind by retreating German units. The men had learned not to trust silence. Too often it hit a machine gun nest, a sniper, or a mined vehicle waiting for someone careless enough to open a door. Sergeant Miller was the first to spot the shape in the treeline. A large half-track, angled awkwardly as if it had rolled to a stop and died where it stood. Its long tracks, heavy suspension, and broad front wheels gave it a silhouette unlike anything the Americans used. The vehicle looked massive, almost overbuilt, with thick mud caked along its frame. "Hell," Private Collins muttered. "That's one of theirs, a big one." The men approached with rifles raised. No movement, no engine heat, no footprints around the cab. Whoever had been driving it had abandoned it in a hurry. The Germans had been falling back all night, leaving equipment behind when they ran out of fuel. But this machine, it looked too valuable to leave without a fight. Inside the cab, the keys were still in the ignition. Rations, maps, and a pair of leather gloves lay scattered across the seats. The engine compartment was closed, but the smell of burnt oil hinted at mechanical trouble. Sergeant Miller called for Corporal Harris, who had worked as a mechanic back home. Harris climbed in, pressed the starter, and to everyone's surprise the engine coughed and actually turned over. "Runs like a damn tractor," he said, leaning out the window. "A big one." The SdKfz 7 came to life with a deep, heavy growl. The men exchanged wide-eyed looks. They had heard of these machines. German heavy tractors used to tow the dreaded 88mm guns. Capturing one intact was rare. Within minutes, a small crowd of GIs gathered around it, laughing like kids who had found a new toy. Some climbed onto the troop benches in the back. Others inspected the engineering with genuine admiration. The half-track was far more advanced than anything American factories produced. "Let's get this beast back to HQ," Miller decided. "Intel will want to tear it apart." They began the slow drive down the road. The SdKfz 7 rumbled powerfully, pulling itself forward with surprising smoothness. Yet even during the short trip, the fuel gauge dropped noticeably. Harris kept glancing at it, shaking his head. "This thing's thirsty," he muttered. "No wonder Fritz left it behind." But for the moment, none of that mattered. The Americans had captured a working piece of German engineering, one of the enemy's prized machines. As they rolled toward their lines in the late afternoon light, the massive vehicle felt like a trophy, a symbol that the once unstoppable German war machine was running out of time, out of gas, and out of luck. And in the minds of the GIs, the capture marked a turning point. If even Germany's best heavy equipment was being abandoned on the roadside, the war was changing in their favor. Long before American GIs ever laid hands on one, the German SdKfz 7 half-track had already built a reputation across Europe. To Allied intelligence, it was more than just a transport vehicle. It was a symbol of German engineering philosophy. Powerful, complex, and built with almost obsessive precision. It was not designed to be convenient. It was designed to obey. Its story began in the early 1930s, when the German army faced a simple but urgent problem. Their most powerful guns, especially the future 88mm anti-aircraft and anti-tank cannons, needed a machine strong enough to pull them over long distances, across mud, snow, and broken roads. The solution had to be fast, reliable under fire, and capable of carrying an entire gun crew with equipment. Engineers from Krauss-Maffei, Borg-Ward, and other German firms were given a near-impossible task. What they created was a hybrid unlike anything used by other armies. The front looked like a truck, with large steering wheels and a powerful Maybach engine. But the rear was a track system built like a small tank. 12 interleaving road wheels carried the weight, distributing it so the heavy tractor could cross soft ground without sinking. The suspension was complex, delicate, and expensive, but on good terrain it gave the SdKfz. 7 an unusually smooth ride, even at high speed. Inside German factories, building one of these vehicles took time, precision, and specialized labor. Every component had to fit perfectly. Every bolt required exact torque. Workers joked that assembling one half-track required the patience of a watchmaker and the strength of a blacksmith. But when finished, the machine was a masterpiece of engineering. Could tow 8 tons of artillery, carry 12 soldiers, and still outrun many Allied trucks. On training grounds across the Reich, young crews were taught to respect the machine. They learned how to handle its stubborn transmission, how to maintain the complicated suspension, and, most of all, how to manage its appetite for fuel. The Maybach engine was powerful, but it was also hungry. For every mile it traveled, it swallowed gasoline like a thirsty monster. German officers accepted this as the price of excellence. In peacetime calculations, fuel was abundant. In wartime, they assumed blitzkrieg victories would provide new supplies. In the early years of the conflict, the SdKfz 7 lived up to its promise. It raced across Poland, France, and the Soviet Union, towing the famous 88mm guns that shattered enemy tanks from miles away. Whenever American or British soldiers saw one through binoculars, they knew a heavy gun could not be far behind. The half-track became a moving icon of German power. But by 1944, the situation had changed. Fuel shortages worsened. Roads broke apart. The once well-maintained machines were repaired with scrap parts and cannibalized components. Some were abandoned not because they were damaged, but because their fuel tanks ran dry. Yet even at the end, mechanics who examined captured SdKfz 7s could not deny the brilliance of its design. It was over-engineered, overcomplicated, and ultimately a victim of Germany's failing logistics, but it remained one of the finest military tractors ever built. A beast of burden, indeed, one powerful enough to change the battlefield, yet too demanding to survive a long, grinding war. The SdKfz 7 stood in the middle of the muddy French road like some wounded metal animal. Its wide tracks were caked with dirt, its paint scorched from recent fighting, yet the machine still looked intimidating. When the American GIs captured it, curiosity quickly replaced caution. They had seen German armor before, but this half-track was different, big, over-engineered, and strangely elegant for a vehicle born in war. Sergeant Collins was the first to climb into the driver's seat. "German engineering," he muttered, gripping the oversized steering wheel. "Let's see if this thing lives up to the legend." The others gathered around, half expecting the engine to explode, half hoping the machine would finally reveal the secrets the Wehrmacht left behind. Collins pressed the starter. The Maybach engine coughed once, then fired up with a deep, resonant growl, so smooth it made one of the soldiers whistle in disbelief. "Our half-tracks don't sound like that," Private Turner said. "This thing purrs like it knows it's better than us." They rolled forward slowly, the SdKfz 7 moving with surprising grace. The front wheels handled the mud just enough, while the tracks gripped the earth like claws. It didn't bounce, didn't rattle, didn't moan like the American M3. Instead, it glided, as if the battlefield were nothing more than a testing ground for its engineering pride. A few minutes into the drive, the GIs were already impressed and annoyed. The speed was decent but not amazing. The comfort was better than anything they had. But when Collins pushed the throttle harder, the engine roared so loudly that every man exchanged the same look. Fuel. The gauge dropped at a terrifying speed, almost visibly. "Holy hell," Turner muttered. "Is this thing drinking gasoline or inhaling it?" 5 minutes later, they were still moving. 10 minutes after that, a sweet smell of burning fuel drifted into the cabin, and the gauge dropped further. Collins slowed the machine and stopped near an abandoned barn. "All right, boys," he said, stepping out. "Mystery solved. This beast runs great for about a mile." The soldiers circled the vehicle, now seeing it with new eyes. The strong suspension, the powerful engine, the towing hooks, everything screamed quality. But everything also screamed excess. It was heavy, complicated, and unbelievably thirsty. Private Turner summed it up best. "I get why the Germans abandoned it. They didn't run out of soldiers, just fuel." Despite the disappointment, the men respected the machine. It was a masterpiece trapped in a war that demanded simplicity. As they walked away, one soldier patted the steel hull. "Good luck, buddy," he said. "You're too fancy for this war." The SdKfz 7 remained behind, silent and imposing, a symbol of what engineering can achieve and what war refuses to tolerate. When the GIs first captured the SdKfz 7, they were impressed, maybe even a little jealous. The machine looked powerful, well-built, and undeniably German. Precise bolts, clean welds, and a Maybach engine that sounded like it came straight out of a luxury car rather than a battlefield. But that admiration didn't last long. Not after they tried to feed it. The trouble began the moment they filled its tank. Private Dawson was the unlucky one who had to handle the fuel cans. "How big is this thing's stomach?" he asked as he poured in the fourth jerry can. No one answered. They were too busy staring at the gauge, which still hadn't reached half. "Fantastic," Sergeant Collins grumbled. "We captured ourselves a mechanical black hole." The Americans had planned to test drive the half-track again that morning. The roads were muddy but manageable, and the area had been secured. But even before they cranked the engine, they noticed something strange. The fuel level had already dropped slightly. Evaporation, Dawson wondered. Or is it just leaking confidence? Once the Maybach engine started, the real shock began. The deep growl that had impressed them earlier now felt threatening. It was the sound of raw horsepower demanding tribute. Every second the engine idled, the needle on the gauge twitched downward like it was trying to escape the machine it stuck in. They set off anyway. The SdKfz 7 moved beautifully across the churned-up French countryside. Smooth, stable, almost graceful for its size. But grace had a price. And that price was gasoline, lots of it. Within 15 minutes, the gauge dropped from 3/4 to half. By then, even the most optimistic soldiers were frowning. "Our M3 half-track can run all morning on what this thing burned in 15 minutes, Collins said, shaking his head. The Germans must have had fuel tanks buried in every village. As they rolled onward, Turner noticed a strong gasoline smell trailing behind them. "That's not exhaust," he said. "That's desperation." They stopped to check for leaks, but found nothing. No puddles, no damaged hoses, nothing visibly wrong. The vehicle was simply doing what it always did, drinking fuel like water in the desert. The half-track became slower as the tank continued emptying. The GIs knew they had to turn back. Another 10 minutes and they might have to abandon it permanently. When they finally returned to camp, the fuel gauge was nearly at zero. Dawson tapped the metal hull. "I've seen planes that burn less fuel," he said. The truth settled in uncomfortably. The SdKfz 7 wasn't just fuel-hungry, it was fuel-apocalyptic. A machine built for a military that assumed fuel would never run out. A machine too advanced for a war too brutal. As the GIs walked away, Collins summed it up with a tired sigh. "Beautiful engineering. Terrible timing. This thing didn't lose to us. It lost to its own fuel bill." The SdKfz 7 remained silent behind them, a monument to the simple fact that even the best machines can fail if they can't afford to move. When the American soldiers finally parked the captured SdKfz 7 for the last time, they gathered around it in silence. The machine had impressed them, frustrated them, educated them, and ultimately reminded them that war was never won by power alone. The half-track stood like a metal monument, heavy, complicated, magnificent, and utterly impractical for the world the Germans were fighting in by 1944. Sergeant Collins almost felt sorry for it. Imagine designing something this strong, he said, running his hand across the armor, and then losing because you can't keep it moving. The lesson didn't need to be spoken out loud. The GIs had lived it over the past few days. They had watched the German vehicle climb hills smoother than their M3s, pull heavy loads without strain, and glide through mud that would slow any American truck. But they also watched it drain fuel so fast that its operational range shrank from a battlefield asset to a battlefield burden. Private Dawson, the one who had spent the most time refueling it, summed it up perfectly. It's like winning a prize horse that eats 3 times more than it runs. The men realized something deeper. Engineering brilliance meant nothing if it couldn't survive the reality of war. The Germans built machines that looked unbeatable on paper, powerful engines, complex mechanics, high towing capacity. But the war wasn't fought on paper. It was fought in ruined villages, muddy fields, and broken supply lines. And in that environment, simplicity often beat sophistication. As they prepared to move out, Turner reflected on how much the half-track had taught them. Its sheer power had shown why German units valued it. Its miserable fuel consumption had shown why so many were abandoned. Its complicated design reminded the Americans just how different the two armies approached war. The U.S. favored practicality. Cheaper parts, easier repairs, enough efficiency to keep moving forward. Germany favored perfection, until perfection collapsed under its own weight. Later that evening, Collins wrote a short note in his worn field journal. Captured SdKfz. 7. Strong. Impressive, but impossible to sustain. The real battle isn't strength, it's staying mobile. That line stuck with him. Mobility was life. Mobility meant supply lines survived, soldiers advanced, wounded were evacuated, reinforcements arrived. Mobility meant the war could continue and one day end. A machine that consumed more fuel than the army could spare wasn't a weapon. It was an anchor. Before leaving, the GIs took one last look at their trophy, not with excitement, but with understanding. It had shown them not just how Germany fought, but why Germany struggled. Power alone wasn't victory. Speed alone wasn't victory. Strength alone wasn't victory. Victory belonged to the machine and the army that could keep going. As they marched away, Dawson patted the SdKfz. 7 sighed and whispered, "You taught us well, big guy, but you're staying right here." And with that, the Americans walked on, carrying not the machine, but the lessons it left behind.